friends, it's Christy. Welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be making a card using Sweet November stamps, including Fairwee's Make a Splash, Fairwee's Make a Splash Expansion Pack, Lynn, and the Horizon Lines Waterfall. So I've masked out my images to create a scene on some Spectrum Noir Ultra Smooth Premium White cardstock with Lawn Fawn Jet Black ink. I'm not going to show how I masked these images today just because it takes me a long time. I did share it in my previous video, so if you'd like to check that out, I can link it here. But for today, I'm just going to jump right into the coloring because this is already going to be a longer video. So I'm starting at the top. I like to work top to bottom on these backgrounds in most cases. So I'm just creating a little sunrise over the top of the waterfall using Y000, Y11, and a little BG10. And then I'm going to start coming down my rock face here. I'm going to add a little bit of color using E40, and I'm just laying that in. It's just a base coat, so I'm just pretty much layering it on everywhere, just so that there's some color on there, and it kind of just makes it feel less intimidating once you've got a little bit of color laid down first. So I'm going to carefully go around all the little areas where the water is pouring down over the rocks. It's hard to tell for some of them until you get them all mapped out. So some of them I might have to come back and add to later on, but it's just, working and getting that color laid in and making things a little bit more bite size. So having some of this larger swaths of color just helps you to be able to see exactly what you're working with. So I've moved up to E42. I'm adding some more of that in. I'm also going to color the rocks that my little Fairwees are sitting on. Those are two separate rocks. Actually, the rock that he's sitting on is one image. I masked that off to put him on there, and then the rock that she's sitting on is part of her image. So I'm going in now with the E44 and just kind of using the side of my marker, getting kind of like imprecise little squiggles of color on there. Rocks, they have a lot of different grains and, colors mixed in. So there's really no right or wrong. You don't really have to worry too much about like light source or anything like that, because rocks have all of that gradient in there already. So I'm just going to lay that in and then start to blend that back out with the E42, just softening that up and making it look a little more seamless. I'm going to keep going with her, and you can see I'm still using kind of the side of the nib, so I get down a lot of color at once, and it's also just a lot softer color. It's not as precise of a line. It's a lot more kind of just smooth, and again filling in those spaces between the waterfall as well. And then I'm going back to my E40 and using some of that on the rocks in front. And then I wanted to cool these down a bit. Rocks, they don't have to be just one color tone. So I'm going to add some warm grays in there as well, using W00 and W1. So if you aren't familiar with Sweet November stamps, they are illustrated by my friend Amy Young. She's also on the Hello Bluebird design team with me. She is an absolutely amazing Copic colorist. As I mentioned in my previous video, she does not have a YouTube channel, but she does have a Facebook page called Adventures in Coloring with Amy, where she does Facebook Lives, and she does absolutely stunning cards, and it's super fun because everybody kind of contributes. She'll say, what color do we want to do the hair today? What color do we want to do this outfit? So it really becomes like this group effort that is a lot of fun. So I encourage you to check that out if you can. So now I'm just adding in some W3 and W5 to build up that color and get it a little bit darker. I wanted the stones to have, a bit more depth to them, not be quite so pale. So I'm just beefing up that color saturation with these darker tones. And you can see that as I get to these darker colors, my positioning on the barrel of the marker gets a lot different. Before I was holding the marker pretty loosely from the back or toward, a little bit higher up on the barrel, I would say. And now that I'm using these darker colors and I want a bit more control, I'm gripping that marker a lot closer to the nib and also using more of the tip of the marker rather than the nib because I just want to be a bit more precise with these darker colors. I don't want to color too much of the images that I want to be white because I'll have to remove that color with the colorless blender, and the darker that color is, the harder it is to remove. So I'm being a little bit more precise as I go darker and darker. And now I'm using that W7 to even add more texture, and then I'll go back and begin to blend that out and just soften everything up and try to make it look really like stone, so it has like these different patterning and, just different sections of color that make up the different rocks that form this amazing background. And whatever colors I'm using on that background, I'm making sure to add those to the rocks that they're sitting on as well. I want it all to be like the same granite or whatever it is, just the same stone that has been there for centuries, that they are resting on and sitting in front of. So now I'm going in with that colorless blender and just cleaning up any little bits where I got color that I didn't want on that waterfall, in her hair, especially anything that is going to be lighter like their skin tone. And now I'm ready to continue on. I'm going to start doing the water now. And I wanted it to be a little bit more of a subdued aqua for today, something different. So I grabbed BG72. It has a lot of gray tone into it. So using this to start out is going to give me that kind of dusty color that I'm trying to go for underneath. So I'm just kind of doing little scribbles of color, leaving some white space so that it can look like flowing water or like the light reflecting on the water, whatever you want it to be. So I'm going to do that in the back and then also down in front. When I get to the front areas, I'm going to use a lot longer streaks because of perspective. The things that are nearer, I want them to look nearer. So I'm using those broader strokes rather than the shorter ones. And now I'm going to come in with some BG000 and begin to blend that out. I hope you guys are enjoying these longer videos with the backgrounds of Copic color in them. I am having so much fun doing these. I did one recently with Hello Bluebird as well. I just really love to do these backgrounds. It's something that I've been wanting to do for a really long time and scared to do for some reason. I don't know why I was so intimidated, but now that I've kind of just decided to go for it, I'm having so much fun coloring these up, and they really aren't as scary as I made them seem in my head. So if you're ever nervous to try a new technique or to color up something that you think you don't have the skills for, you're never going to develop the skills if you don't try. So I really encourage you to just go for it. In the end, it's just paper and ink and a little bit of your time and, your markers, your supplies, whatever. But, that's the only way to get better, is to just keep doing it, keep practicing. One of the comments I get so much is, I wish I could color like you. And I've been doing this for 10 years. When you've been doing it for 10 years, I promise you, you will be doing it just as well, if not better. So just keep at it. Try new things. Don't be afraid. Just go for it. I mean, there's really very little risk involved here. So yeah. So I'm using BG10 and then going back to my BG72, just kind of working those back and forth until I get a color that I'm really happy with. I also threw a little BG32 in there just to brighten it up a bit, and now I'm going to go on to my waterfalls, starting with that BG70 once again, and I'm doing a little bit of color at the top and the bottom of each of those little sections of waterfall. And then I'm going to come in with my BG10. I'm doing it as if I were hair and working lightest to darkest, building up that color and adding in that little bit of streakiness that's going to create that look. Normally in hair it would be like the highlights and lowlights, but for the waterfall it's going to just make that water look like it's flowing. So I'm going to move up now to the BG72 and really add those feathers of color in from the top and bottom of each of those little sections, just working my way across and leaving the center of that waterfall white for now. I really want to keep that nice and light in the center. I'm also making sure to vary the length of my strokes. So I'm having some that are just little short ones and then a few that are a little bit longer. I don't want them all to be exactly the same. That's also going to give me that look of the running water. So once I'm done with that BG72, I'm going to move to the BG32, which is that really bright aqua. It's not too bright though. It's not like, you know, like a BG15 or anything like that. It's kind of like a more muted but still clearly aqua. I really like this color. I think it's really versatile and works with a lot of different markers. So now that I've worked my way all the way down, I'm going to work my way back in the reverse. So I'm going back to the BG10 now, and I'm encroaching a little bit more into that white space. And then finally I'll come in with that BG70 and add a few more little streaks here and there to finish it up. Alright, so now that I've got the background all filled in with color, I want to add a bit of detail to that rock face by adding in some moss. I just felt like that would be more realistic, and I wanted to have like something warm growing there, something living in the background on that kind of rock face. I just thought that it would be softening it a little bit, you know, adding a little bit of life to it. So I'm taking the YG03 and just kind of doing little dot detail, little stippling marks here and there. I'm also going to add some moss on the rocks that they're sitting on, because that would be, you know, growing up on those as well. And just kind of going here and there, no rhyme or reason, just kind of picking places where I think it should go, making sure that some of it comes into the spaces between the rocks. And that's just the base coat. You know, it doesn't look very realistic just yet, but I'm going to darken that up with some G46. That one is a lot more cool toned, and so it's going to kind of tie in with the cool tones of the water. So I'm just dabbing that on as well. I'm going to use it a little bit more sparing than the previous color because I don't want too much of that darkness. I want it to all kind of just get soft and look like that nice, you know, soft moss that just grows on rocks and makes them so slippery when you're trying to navigate across a stream or something like that. So just putting it here and there, wherever I think it should live, just real quick and easy, not thinking too much about it, just letting the marker kind of lead me where it wants to go. And then I'm going to come in with the next shade, which is going to be YG93. This one has a bit more of an olive tone, so now we're going back into warm tones to kind of tie in to the warm grays and the ease that I used on the rocks. And I'm just going to stipple that right over top as well. I want these three greens to kind of meld together and just, you know, make it look more realistic, you know, and not just like dots in the background. I want it to all just really come to life back there. So adding those different tones is going to, you know, make it look a bit more realistic. And because that YG93 has so much gray tone in it, it's really going to just merge into that rock wall. Then I came in with YG97. I added a bit more dot detail with that, and then also used that to color in the grasses that I stamped behind the two front rocks. And now that I'm satisfied with that background, I'm going to start to concentrate on these adorable little fairwees up front. I'm going to do the boy first, and I wanted to do a little bit of a tan skin tone for him. So I'm using E00, E11, and E13. The E13 is what I'm starting with. I'm going to put a little shadow up under his hairline and down the side of his face, also on his back and the bottoms of his arms and legs. And then I'm blending that out with the E11. And just making sure to really go over the edge of that E13 so everything is nice and smooth. This is skin, so I don't want there to be any texture. I want everything to be super smooth. Then I'm going to add in the E00 as my highlight. And I did do a second layer off screen just to smooth everything out even further. But before I do that, I wanted to do the girl. And for her, I wanted her skin tone to be just a little bit lighter. So I'm going to my typical Caucasian skin tone, which is E000, E00, and E11. So the darkest for her is that E11. And then I'm going to blend that out with the E00, saving a lot of room on her face for that E000 since she's really facing forward. I want the light to be really bright and light on her face. So I'm going to do a second layer for her skin tone as well. And then on both of them, I'm going to add some rosy cheeks. I'm using R11 and R20. I like to do a little oval shape with that R20 and then blend around the edge of that with the R11, which just softens into their skin tone. And now I'm going to do some hair. So I'm going to start with him. I chose E55, E57, and E59. And just like I did the waterfall, I'm starting with my lightest first. This is the E55, and I'm doing little feathering strokes from the top and bottom edge of each of those little sections of hair. And then I'm darkening that up with the E57. I forgot to do the little part below his ear, but I will go back and get that in a minute. For now, I'm going to go on to my E59 and add in some more strokes with that. I'm getting shorter with the darker strokes because I want there to be less of that and more of the highlight shades. And then I'll go back in the reverse to the E57 and then the E55, just quick little feathering strokes that are going to join up those little sections. And then there you can see I did the bottom of his hair. I'm going to move on to hers, and I'm going to do E50, E53, and E55. Her curls are a little bit more tricky just because they're all so upswept, and I wasn't 100% sure how to tackle them. I haven't been coloring hair that long, so I'm still kind of figuring some of the different hairstyles out, but I basically tried to put the darkest color in the center of the spirals of the curls and then blend it out from there, just wherever I thought it looked good. And then on the front pieces, I did the same as I did for the boy. I put the darkest at the top and the bottom, leaving that center part where it's kind of bumped out over her forehead to be the part that catches the light. I did add in some E55 for her. I just wanted to go in a little bit of a darker direction, and I wasn't quite getting there with the E53 as my darkest. And then I decided to add just a tiny touch of E57 in there. I like a lot of contrast in my coloring. It's just my personal preference. I feel like you get so much more depth when you have a wider difference between your lightest lights and your darkest darks. So adding in those extra colors, I feel like just was what was needed for her to get it to where I wanted it to go, the vision that I had for her in my head. So once I finished up with their skin and hair, I'm going to go on to their cute little outfits, and I'm going to give them some little jean overalls. So for him, I decided to go a shade darker than I'm going to end up doing for her. So I chose B93, B95, B97, and B99. Starting with the B99, giving him kind of like a dark wash jeans. And then I'm blending out with the B97. The B95 is going to be the highlight shade on the actual pants, and then for the cuff I wanted that to be lighter, like the insides of the jeans turned out, so I used the B93 and the B91 for that. For the girl's outfit, I took away the B99. I wanted to give her just a lighter wash jean, just to kind of separate them a little bit. I didn't want them to be too matchy-matchy. So I started with the B97, and then I'm blending out with the B95. I'm also kind of giving her a little shadow under the waistband part, you know, just to kind of increase that and make it look, you know, more dimensional there. And then the B93, and then finally in the top of her bodice part, and then her little belly, I used the B91. And I did a second layer on both of their jeans as well off screen, just because I like that saturation to get, you know, really bright, and they are the forefront images, so I just really want them to have that pop of color that really draws your eye to the front and center, as they're competing against that absolutely gorgeous waterfall background, so they really need to have that pop. I'm going to give her a red headband. I chose R24, R29, and R39 for that. Just put the darkest color on the edges, and then also in the center where it's gathered into that bow. And then for their wings, I just use BG quadruple 0 to add some color to that. I wanted them to look transparent, but since they're just over the blue, there wasn't a lot to do. I added in a few touches of color with the BG triple 0 just to give it that same kind of lifelike look. And then for my fish, I wanted them to be trout, so I started with a cool gray just to give them like a base color. And then I'm taking YG61 for the top half. So just adding that color in. I needed to darken that up, so I grabbed YG63 as well. Added a bit of shading on the tops of their heads, blended that back out again. And then for the bottom of their body, I used R20 to give that little pink touch and blended that out with R11. And then the green part wasn't quite dark enough for me, so I did go back and do a second layer with that YG63 first, and then blend it out with the YG61. I went over a little bit of the pink to get it to soften into each other, and then added a few little dot detail for scales with the YG67. For his fishing pole, I'm going to go back to the E57, which is one of the colors I used in their hair, and I'm just going to color that in solid since it's such a thin little line. And that is going to finish up the coloring finally, so I hope you guys enjoyed that. So I'm just going to quickly put this card together. I trimmed it down with one of the MFT A2 stitched rectangle stacks set 2. So there you can see that stitching detail. I'm going to pop that in my MISTI so that I can stamp a sentiment. I'm using VersaFine Onyx Black ink because I wanted it to be nice and bold. I'm using the one that says soak up some fun, and using my Twiddler's Nook pressure pal to make sure that I get a nice solid impression with even pressure. So there you can see that. I'll set that off to the side to dry. In the meantime, I'm going to pop my card base in my MISTI. I'm using a piece of Lawn Fawn cilantro cardstock and Noble Fur ink to stamp out Lynn from the little mini set, which is called Lynn. This is a free with a $60 purchase image, so that's just something to keep in mind if you're interested in picking up some of these cuties for yourself. I also think it's really interesting that her name is Lynn. I don't know if Amy was aware of this, probably she was, but the name Lynn means waterfall. It's my middle name along with half the population of America. But I was actually born in a place that is known for its waterfalls, so I kind of have always liked the significance of the name and always been drawn to waterfalls my whole life. So just thought that that was cool. I also stamped Make a Splash. So this could be for a variety of different occasions. Maybe somebody starting a new job or a new venture or going off on a trip, whatever, you know, lots of different possibilities. I'm using some pattern paper from the Echo Park Let's Go Camping 6x6. I've already chosen 2 patterns, but I'm looking for a third that is going to tie the color palette together. So I ended up choosing this one here with the lanterns and banners. Hardly any of it is going to show in the final card, but I just needed something that had those colors so you would see little bits of them that just pulls the whole thing together. So those are the 3 that I'm going to use. I've trimmed those down with another of the A2 Stitch Rectangle Stacks Set 2 from MFT. I used the largest for the pattern papers and the second largest for the focal panel. So I'm just going to adhere those to my card front with some liquid glue. They are going to leave just the slightest border of that cilantro cardstock showing on the outside edge, which is going to really tie back into the colors that I used for the moss on the rocks. So that was completely intentional. Then I'm going to take this red strip, I'm going to run that down vertically from the top to the bottom. And then I'll take the lanterns and banners and run that across the center horizontally. Like I said, you're only going to see a little bit of both the red and the multicolored background pattern paper, but you know, it's still going to help just pull that color palette all together. I've added some foam tape to the back of my focal panel, so I'm going to line that up in the center and just press that down into place. And then I wanted to finish up with a little bit of Stardust Stickles just to add a bit of sparkle. Could not resist it on that waterfall. So I'm going to start with it on the fairy's wings just to give them a little bit of a shimmering quality and just draw your attention to them as well. I also put a little bit on the top of my rainbow trout. Just a little bit. I didn't want too much there, so I tapped some off with my finger just so you get like the look of scales. And then I'm going to come in to the waterfall and do the same kind of feathery strokes to match the coloring that I did and just add a little bit of glimmer here and there on those each of those little waterfall sections. So I'm just barely squeezing that nozzle and using the tip to kind of pull the stickles where I want it to go. I also added a little bit to the water that's kind of amassing down at the bottom edge just as the waterfall enters the rest of the water. And there you can see that a little bit better, and I'll also give you another peek at the inside. I had such a blast guest designing with Sweet November stamps and playing with these adorable goodies. I do hope that you will go and check them out in the shop. This is the brand new release, Farewell to Summer. So if you guys enjoyed this one, please give it a like and subscribe. Make sure that you've rung that notification bell so you don't miss any future videos. I post new ones every Monday and Friday, and occasional bonus videos as well. If you'd like to keep watching, here are 2 extra videos I thought you might also enjoy, and I hope you guys all have an absolutely amazing day. Bye-bye.